Now that the public has insulted your art?
No.
Why not?
Well, I hadn't thought about it.
It doesn't bother you at all then?
No.
Well, do you think that they've shown a lack of appreciation for what pop art means?
No.
Andy, do you think that pop art has sort of reached the point where it's becoming repetitious now?
Yes.
Do you think it should break away from being pop art?
No.
Are you just going to carry on?
Yes.
Pop art was an artistic phenomenon that began in the 1960s. According to Elaine Elma, assistant professor at the head of the English department at the University of Le Mans, who specializes in American art, pop art was an artistic reflection of America's own consumerism culture. Many of us have seen examples of pop art in today's culture and know of it from back then as well. And sometimes we wonder what's the fine line between pop art and whether it being a piece of artwork or an advertisement for something. And today I want to introduce you to what pop art is and two of the major artists, including Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein of the movement. Sorry. Pop art began in the late 1950s and went on through the early 1970s. It was born in Britain in the 1950s with an artistic group called the Independent Group. And they were influenced mainly by Western culture, and so it eventually spread over here because it was about us. Pop art, and the term pop came from the word popular culture, and that includes television, film, even ideas of the day, and mass media, which contains all of those, is what shaped Western culture and brought about pop art. Because it was during the 1960s, Vietnam, the war, it really had a big impact in pop art, and many of the artists were either for it or against it. And the U.S. actually commissioned many of the pop artists, including Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein, to help in whatever way they could, to help end the war. Andy Warhol, he was famous. Many of you might know who he is. He's probably one of the most famous pop artists, and you can put him there. This is him. One of the most famous pop artists, known for his Campbell soup cans and for his controversial electric chairs that he would colorize, for his celebrities, his celebrity portraits of Marilyn Monroe and Jackie Kennedy. As we see here, the electric chair, Campbell soup, Marilyn Monroe, and Jackie Kennedy. And while many artists are very political in what they create, Andy Warhol claims different. He said that, according to Bennett Caspers, associate professor of law at Hofstra University of Law, Andy Warhol would deny any political affiliation with his artwork. Although his friends would beg to differ, saying that he basically was a liar when he was being interviewed. As we saw in the interview earlier, he kind of had like a snobby attitude and was laughing with his manager during the interview. He acted like there was no meaning to his art, but when in fact there really was, and he left it to the audience to decide what that was for themselves. Andy Warhol was a screen printer, he was a painter, he was a sculptor and a filmmaker, and many of his films, which he created on later during the 60s, they were hours-long films of just someone sleeping, or it was a man smoking. There was one of a girl and a guy. I think they're sleeping together now. They're very controversial, but his way of thinking was very abstract and different, which is what the whole pop art movement was about. And he also did prints, as we see here, of colorized forms of advertisements, and celebrities, and many other random objects such as flowers and a banana. And while Andy Warhol was a major part of the pop art movement, there were many different types of styles and aesthetics, that artists used. For example, Roy Lichtenstein. Here he is. He was known for his comic book type paintings that resembled comic books. But he was actually looked down upon a lot more because he has a painting that was sold for $5.5 billion, and compared to a whole comic book that would sell for a couple of dollars. So many comic book artists were kind of jealous of him. He has a quote, if you could put on that. It says, "In parody, the implication is the perverse, and I feel that in my own work. I don't mean it to be that, because I don't dislike the work I'm parodying. The things I've parodied, I actually admire." And here we see that he actually loves this comic book style of art that we can see in the next slide. He's not trying to insult them in any way, the artist, but he's actually admiring it. And his style of art is also, he uses screen printing and painting. And it's called the Ben-Day dot, that if you could see in the hand right here with a bunch of dots. Or in the woman's face, there's actually a bunch of dots that make up her skin tone. It's where you use a bunch of small dots painted, and then like when you look at it from a further perspective, it actually creates a picture. And in conclusion, pop art is not meant to make a mockery of the subject, but to improve, admire, praise it, and just bring it to the audience's attention. Andy Warhol admired Marilyn Monroe. Roy Lichtenstein loved comics. As a result, they became their muses for their particular artworks. Created in a variety of ways, pop art was a national phenomenon during the 1960s that is still very much loved today. I hope you're able to learn something new and you enjoyed my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Judy, tell us what you thought.
Personally, I enjoyed her topic. I have a knowledge about it, so I think I judged her a little bit better too because I know what she was talking about. And I think she provided a great history about it. She also provided a definition of what pop art was right in the beginning. She provided great visual aids, and she was very descriptive about them. And she spoke about the type of, like how the face was made up by the dots. That's a trademark that he had. And then she also provided a quote by one of the artists, and her thesis I thought was really good as well. Her body movement was good. She did turn around a little bit, but that was because she had to tell him to change the slide. And overall, I think her body movement was pretty good.
All right. Well, I think it worked out pretty well once you got the video clip going, that we get a chance to see what Andy Warhol was like and get a sense of what the attitude of pop artists were about the world that they lived in. I think you get more of that from the video clip than you would get from an explanation of it, so that makes sense to include that. You do a nice job identifying the subject. There's good justification early on for talking about it. It sounds like you've kind of conflated the specific purpose statement and the previous statement into one component. So ultimately we know where we're going, but I think what it is we're supposed to see when we get there, I think, is not as clear as it could be. I like the definitions that you provided for the most part. I thought that you did a good job citing material early in the speech especially. I thought it was very clear that you had done some research on the material. The visual materials are all pretty well organized. They define the two artists that you talk about pretty clearly. I think you could get a little bit more